France, 1440. In a cold stone room beneath the castle, a candle flickers. A boy's scream echoes. Then, silence. The man behind it? Not a thief. Not a peasant. He was once a knight. A war hero. He fought beside Joan of Arc. His name was Gilles de Rais. He was rich, noble, powerful. But inside, he was rotting. After Joan was burned, something in him died. And in that empty space, darkness grew. He turned to black magic. He believed demons could give him power. But when animals weren't enough for sacrifice, he chose children. This is not a legend. It is a true story. One of the first serial killers in history. Watch until the end. Subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story. Because the past is darker than you think. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a blood-red glow over the chateau's cold stone walls. Deep in the heart of Brittany, in western France, a boy was screaming. His voice echoed, but no one came. Because no one could. The door to the hidden chamber had been bolted shut from the outside. The scent inside the room was thick with smoke. And something worse. A man stood over the boy, dressed in velvet. Eyes wild. Voice calm. "It will be quick. If you're good," the man whispered. The man's name was Gilles de Rais. Once a knight. Once a war hero. Once a companion to Joan of Arc herself. Now, a monster. The crimes you're about to hear are not legend. Not myth. Not superstition. They are real. They are documented. And they are terrifying. 1405, Champs-sur-Loire, France. Gilles de Rais was born into unimaginable privilege. His family owned lands that stretched to the sea, castles tall as cathedrals, and wealth rivaling royalty. The house of Montmorency-Laval was powerful. Feared, even. His father, Guy de Laval, was a famed knight. Ruthless on the battlefield. Respected across France. His mother, Marie de Craon, was beautiful, devout, and quiet. They were the perfect noble couple, until they weren't. In 1415, when Gilles was just 10 years old, his father died in what was called a hunting accident. But whispers spread that he'd fallen on his own lance, that the wound was no accident at all. His mother died soon after. Some said from grief. Others weren't so sure. Gilles and his younger brother were left orphaned, heirs to vast fortune, but still just boys. Their guardianship passed to their grandfather, Jean de Craon. Jean was cold, brutal, and calculating. He wasn't interested in raising children. He was interested in legacy. In power. He raised Gilles like a weapon. Latin before breakfast. Sword practice before lunch. Theology, court etiquette, and military tactics until dusk. There was no affection. Only discipline. And from that, something strange began to grow. Gilles became quiet. Obedient, but cold. He didn't laugh. He didn't cry. Servants said they found him staring at dead animals in the woods, unmoving, for hours. And soon, the darkness would find a spark. In 1420, at just age 15, Gilles joined his first battle. The 100 Years' War was raging. France was fractured. The English occupied swaths of land. Morale was low. Cities were burning. Gilles was fearless. Brutal. Efficient. He moved through the battlefield with the calm of a surgeon. He didn't just fight. He won. By 1427, he had earned the favor of powerful nobles, commanding armies, gaining titles. But then, France's fate changed. And so did Gilles. Because in 1429 she appeared. She was just a girl. 17 years old. Illiterate. Peasant-born. She wore men's armor. Carried a banner. Said she spoke with angels. That God told her to drive out the English and crown Charles VII king. Her name was Joan of Arc. Most nobles laughed at her. Called her insane. Delusional. Gilles did not. He believed her. Fought beside her. Protected her with his life. In battle after battle, She led the French to victory. Gilles was always at her side, her shield, her sword, her shadow. Some said he loved her. Others said he worshipped her. Whatever the truth, their bond was undeniable. But then, in 1430, Joan was captured by the English, imprisoned, tried for heresy, and in 1431 she was burned alive. Gilles watched from a distance as smoke filled the sky. Something inside him broke that day. He returned to Brittany a hero. But he wasn't a man anymore. He was a hollow shell. Back at his castle, Gilles turned away from politics, from war, from God. He spent his wealth on theaters, feasts, golden robes, exotic animals, and elaborate plays where he always starred as the noble savior. He built a chapel with ceilings so high the walls moaned when it rained. But behind closed doors, servants whispered. He had begun building something beneath the castle. Secret rooms, strange symbols, black candles, and then came a visitor. A man named Francesco Prelati, an alchemist from Florence, arrived. He claimed he could speak with Lucifer. Gilles welcomed him like a king. They locked themselves in the lower halls for nights at a time. What were they doing? They said they were summoning power, wealth, immortality. But that wasn't all. Animals began to disappear from nearby farms. Cats, goats, dogs. Locals said they heard screams at night, but not animal screams. Then, one day, Gilles gave an order. "Bring me a boy." The boy's name is lost to history. He was likely poor, maybe hungry, maybe tricked. Some records say he was taken from a local village. Others say he was lured by promises of food and gold. What we do know is that he never came home. That night, torches flickered behind the thick stone walls of Château de Tifages. Inside, beneath velvet banners and stained glass, screams echoed through corridors no one dared enter. What happened to him is known only through confessions, Gilles' own words, written down under oath. And they are horrifying. The boy was stripped. Gilles made him kneel and pray. Then, he killed him, slowly, methodically. And when it was done, Gilles kissed his cheeks, as if tucking him in for bed. He later said, "The act brought me more pleasure than any woman ever could. It wasn't just murder. It was ritual. And it was only the beginning." Over the next 7 years, children began to vanish across the countryside. Servants, some loyal, some fearful, began to carry out Gilles' demands. They'd visit villages, find boys aged 6 to 14, and bring them back. Many were street urchins, forgotten. Some were pages or choir boys, chosen for their beauty. Others were the sons of nobles. None ever returned. In one confession, Gilles admitted, "I preferred them when they were terrified." He kept detailed records, but not of names, just descriptions, how they cried, how they died. Some he buried. Others, he burned in the fireplace with his alchemist beside him. Francesco Prelati would chant over the ashes. They believed it would summon power. When questioned later, Prelati said, "The spirits never came." But Gilles kept trying. By 1435, Gilles had squandered nearly all of his wealth. He had sold lands, melted down heirlooms, and even sold holy relics to fund his twisted desires. Worse, rumors had begun to leak. Children disappearing near his estate. Strange lights in the night. Villagers speaking of demons. But Gilles didn't stop. In fact, he got bolder. He built a theater at Tifages, inviting crowds to watch him perform. He starred in every production. One servant said he'd play the hero, and then kill someone backstage. He was now untouchable, in his mind. But outside his walls, the tide was turning. In 1440, desperate for money and influence, Gilles made a grave error. He kidnapped a priest, a legal and political offense even nobility couldn't excuse. The Duke of Brittany, long suspicious of Gilles, now had an excuse to act. A full investigation was ordered. Judges, nobles, and church officials descended on his lands. What they found was worse than they imagined. Beneath the castle were torture chambers, scorched walls, blood-stained tables. There were testimonies from servants, maids, even his personal clerks. One boy, barely 13, escaped and told the court. He made me sing hymns while he undressed. Then he told me to call him God. Another witness, an accomplice, said, "There were hundreds. We lost count." Under interrogation, and likely torture, Gilles finally broke. He confessed to murdering over 100 children. Some estimates say as many as 600. He described the methods, the rituals, the feelings of power. He showed no remorse. When asked why, he said, "I did it for pleasure. And because I could." On October 26, 1440, Gilles de Rais was publicly hanged and burned. Thousands gathered to witness it. Some cried. Some cheered. Some prayed. And when it was over, the land fell silent. The castle still stood. The rooms were emptied. But the echoes remained. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story. Because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home. When the news broke, France was stunned. Gilles de Rais, hero of the 100 Years' War, companion of Joan of Arc, nobleman, knight, was a child killer. The church moved quickly to erase his name from its records. His family tried to recover what land and dignity they could. But the people, they whispered. In marketplaces, they spoke of dark magic and monsters. In taverns, they told stories of blue-bearded knights who stole children in the night. The French countryside became haunted by his legend. And over time, the truth began to blur with myth. Within a generation, a new tale began to spread. A story about a rich nobleman with a deep blue beard who murdered his wives, hid their bodies in a locked room, and smiled as their blood soaked the floor. It was a fairy tale, but many believed it was inspired by Gilles de Rais. In fact, by the time Charles Perrault published Bluebeard in 1697, scholars already debated whether it was based on him. The similarities were too many. A nobleman with secrets. Forbidden chambers. Mass murder hidden by wealth. The final discovery by horrified outsiders. Was it fiction? Or memory? Was the story a warning to children, or a distorted echo of France's first known serial killer? Centuries later, historians began to ask a new question. What if Gilles de Rais was innocent? Some argued that the trial was politically motivated. The Duke of Brittany stood to gain his lands. The church wanted a scapegoat to solidify its power. And confessions made under torture were notoriously unreliable. Could it have been a medieval setup? Supporters of this theory point out. His trial lasted just 2 months. Testimonies were inconsistent. Servants were threatened with execution unless they spoke against him. And perhaps most curious of all, his conviction allowed the Duke to confiscate his estates legally. But skeptics remind us, there were too many victims, too many witnesses, and Gilles' own written confession, written when he was calm, lucid, and not under duress, was filled with shocking detail. After his execution, Gilles was buried in an unmarked grave, his body burned to ash, his memory buried in shame. His castles, including the infamous Château de Tiffauges, fell into ruin. For centuries, locals refused to go near them. They claimed to hear children's screams on the wind. They said the earth beneath the castle had turned sour, nothing would grow there. In 1992, excavations at Tiffauges revealed strange underground chambers, chains, and burned bones. Were they Gilles' torture rooms? Or something older? No one knows for sure. But even today, Tiffauges is called by another name. The Castle of the Devil. Gilles de Rais is now known as one of the earliest recorded serial killers in history. He wasn't driven by hunger, poverty, or trauma. He was driven by desire, by control, by a dark need that grew beyond anything human. His story forces a terrible question. Can evil grow in the light? Can a man once celebrated become a monster in secret? And if it happened then, when the world was watching, could it happen again? Some say he was a victim of politics. Others say he was the devil made flesh. But either way, what happened to those hundreds of children is real. And their voices, though long gone, still echo in stone. This is not fiction. Every detail is part of a real case that you can verify yourself. Gilles de Rais lived. He fought beside Joan of Arc. And he was executed for the murder of over 100 children. His castles are still standing. His story, still terrifying. For centuries, Gilles de Rais was erased from polite history. The church expunged his name. Nobility denied his connection. His descendants avoided speaking of him. But his legacy refused to stay buried. In the 20th century, his story was revived by artists and scholars. Poets like Joris Karl Huysmans and playwrights like Antonin Artaud were obsessed with him. They saw Gilles not as a monster, but as a tragic figure, consumed by madness and longing. One French writer called him a prince of the occult, and the loneliest man in Christendom. But others were not so kind. Modern psychologists analyzing his case suggest he was a classic psychopath, narcissistic, manipulative, devoid of empathy, and dangerously intelligent. What makes a man like Gilles de Rais? He had everything: wealth, power, education, fame. And yet, he turned to darkness. Criminal profilers today note chilling parallels between de Rais and modern serial killers like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer. He lured victims with charm and lies. He isolated them in secret locations. He killed not for necessity, but for pleasure and power. And when questioned, he gave cold, detailed confessions. But there was something even more disturbing. Gilles didn't see himself as evil. In his writings, he claimed to be searching for truth. He believed he was chosen, that through darkness, he would find light. A twisted logic that mirrors countless killers after him. Their names were never recorded. Their faces forgotten by history. But they were real. Boys and girls, many between the ages of 7 and 14. Taken from villages. Disappeared on lonely roads. Lured by servants, by music, by offers of food or money. What happened to them was never fully described in court. And maybe that's a mercy. But records show that their clothes were often found in piles. Their bodies, sometimes buried hastily. And the sounds that came from those castle walls. The servants testified, "We heard screams, then silence." Even centuries later, that silence is deafening. In 1992, a controversial effort was made to posthumously retrial Gilles de Rais in a symbolic court in Nantes, France. Some historians argued his execution was politically motivated. They said no forensic evidence was ever found, and that testimonies could not be trusted after torture. But others, especially families of the regions affected, vehemently opposed it. One local historian said, "He may not have been guilty of every charge, but children vanished, too many, and all near his lands." The retrial ended with no formal verdict. The question of guilt remains open in some minds. But for most, the horror outweighs the doubt. Today, Château de Tifages is a tourist site. It hosts medieval fairs. Children come dressed as knights and princesses. Families walk its stony halls, smiling. But beneath the floors, the old rooms remain. The chapel, the cellar, the hidden staircases. Some say on cold nights, you can feel something watching you. The air grows heavy. The wind seems to whisper. And a shadow passes the window, just out of sight. No one speaks of Gilles de Rais openly there. They call him the Bluebeard. They tell children not to wander far. And the castle walls, they listen. They've heard the cries before. This is a true story. Gilles de Rais lived. He fought beside Joan of Arc. He was tried and executed in 1440 for the ritual murder of children. His castles, his letters, his confessions, all still exist. You can find them in archives and libraries across Europe. Have you ever heard this story before? Do you believe Gilles de Rais was guilty? Or framed by history? If true stories like this haunt you, make you curious, and stay in your mind. Subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story, because every week, we uncover the darkest truths hiding in plain sight. They still speak his name in whispers. In towns like Nantes, Machecoul, and Tifages, fishermen claim they've seen a figure on horseback, riding near the old ruins. Clad in armor, cloaked in blue and gold, face hidden beneath a visor. Locals say it's just legend, but others know better. They say the land remembers, and when night falls over the western coast of France, you can feel him watching, waiting. A man once called hero, now remembered as a curse. In modern Tifages, school teachers teach history carefully. They teach about the 100 Years' War, about Joan of Arc, about feudal lords and castles, but not always about Gilles. Because how do you explain to a child that a man who once saved a nation, later destroyed children just like them? Instead, the warnings are passed down through stories. Don't go near the woods after dark. Stay away from the old well. If you hear a flute playing when no one's there, run. And at the heart of every tale is one name, whispered like a spell: Gilles de Rais. For years, scholars have tried to untangle his mind. Some blame his grandfather, some blame war, some blame madness. But the truth is, no single cause can explain a man like Gilles de Rais. He was not broken by one moment. He shattered piece by piece. A child groomed for power, a warrior praised for bloodshed, a nobleman surrounded by yes-men, a man left empty by grief, and filled with darkness. Psychologists today say he fits the pattern of what we now call organized serial killers. Controlled, intelligent, manipulative, performing acts of horror with ritual precision. And yet he believed himself noble, a man searching for divine truth. He once said in court, "I committed these acts in pursuit of wisdom, and to learn secrets hidden from men." The castle of Tifages is still there. Stone walls cracked by time, moss creeping along broken steps. But if you go down far enough, past the public halls, beyond the roped-off sections, there's a door that's never opened to tourists. A narrow stairwell carved into stone, and at the bottom, a small, black room. Its walls are scorched, its ceiling stained. Some say you can still see marks on the floor, circles, symbols, words in Latin. Historians believe this was his ritual chamber, where he summoned devils, where he offered blood, where the line between nobleman and monster disappeared forever. Today, most French people know him by a different name, Barbe Bleue, Bluebeard. A fairy tale was born from his legend. A rich nobleman who kills his wives and hides their bodies in a forbidden room. It was said to scare young girls from marrying rich old men. But beneath the myth is a truth far more horrifying. Gilles de Rais was real. His victims were not wives, but children. His secrets weren't behind one door, but hidden in castles across Brittany. He didn't need to hide his crimes. He was powerful enough that people looked away, until it was too late. This is not fiction. Every name, every place, every fact you've heard is part of the historical record. Gilles de Rais lived, ruled, and was executed in France in 1440 for the murder of dozens, possibly hundreds, of children. You can read the transcripts. You can visit the castles. You can see his signature still on confession documents. This really happened. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story, because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home. October 26, 1440. Nantes, France. The town square was silent. Thousands had gathered, but no one spoke. Not even the children. A gallows had been built. A pyre of wood stacked high beside it. A man stood in chains, in velvet robes. It was Gilles de Rais. He looked thinner than before, older. The proud armor was gone. But his voice, when he spoke, was calm. He asked to be forgiven. He begged parents to protect their children. He said he had made a pact with evil, and lost everything. Then, At his request, he was allowed to kneel with the two servants who had helped him. They wept together. They prayed. And then, the rope tightened. His body dropped. He died quickly. Moments later, his corpse was placed on the fire. And the flames, some say, burned unnaturally blue. The ashes of Gilles de Rais were never buried. No tomb. No monument. No resting place. The church denied him consecrated ground. His family erased his name from records. The lands he once ruled were divided. His castle fell into ruin. But the stories lived on. Peasants swore the grass where he died never grew again. Fishermen claimed the river near his castle turned red at sunset. And for centuries, parents told children, "Don't wander off, or Bluebeard will take you too." There are only a few surviving records from his trial. But one of them includes this line, written in Latin, signed in his hand. "I did it. Of my own will. And I knew what it meant." Historians call it one of the first documented confessions of a serial killer. And the detail is terrifying. He lured the children himself. He preferred boys aged 6 to 12. He offered food, jobs, clothing. And once inside, he locked the doors. He performed the killings himself. Sometimes quickly. Sometimes not. He wept afterward. He prayed afterward. Then, he did it again. And again. And again. The strangest part of all. Gilles never spoke her name at trial. Not once did he mention Joan of Arc. Some say he was protecting her legacy. Some say she was the last light inside him. Some say her death broke him. Psychologists today wonder, was he trying to summon her back? Was every ritual, every sacrifice, an attempt to fill the void she left? One theory even suggests Gilles believed Joan was a messenger of God, and when she died, he sought to replace her by offering innocent souls to whatever would listen. Today, Gilles de Rais is remembered in two ways. In history books, as a knight, a nobleman, a war hero. In folklore, as a demon, a killer, a warning. But the truth lies somewhere in between. He stood at the crossroads of light and dark. He walked with saints, and then danced with devils. He could have been remembered as a savior. Instead, he chose to be feared. And now, 6 centuries later, the question still lingers. Was Gilles de Rais a monster created by war? Or did the monster live inside him all along, waiting for the right moment to escape? Today, if you visit the ruins of Tifage's castle, you'll find a museum, tour guides, postcards. But if you look closely, behind the stage, past the tourist lights, there's a sealed door. No one opens it. Locals say it leads to the Black Room, where hundreds of screams were never heard, where shadows cling to stone like they were burned into the walls. Some say if you press your ear to the door, you'll hear footsteps, a child crying, and then, softly, a man's voice whispering in Latin. Have you heard this story before? What do you think truly happened behind those castle walls? If you're drawn to real stories that stay with you, subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story. Because every week, we reveal the darkest truths hidden in plain sight. Watch the next video on your screen, or dive into our full playlist of real mysteries and crimes. The next story might be even more shocking.